Today we will be working on the Unit 3 study guide. Again, this unit was on inequalities, as you can see. So in the top section, you do have a little warm-up, and I do want to stress the importance of knowing your vocab. So I'm not really going to give you any answers for this top section because, again, you should give it a try on your own. And then if you're not entirely sure about any of them, make sure you go back and look at the word bank that we had. It kind of looked like 4 squares, and then we had each of the inequality symbols in one of the squares. So again, if you don't have any of these answers down, you should be going back to that review packet and checking that out. In the next section, there are a couple of different types of problems that I'd like to go over. So looking at the first problem, there's not really anything special going on with these. All of these actually in this top section, the first 6, you can kind of set up like the pipe or equations that we've done before. Bear with me, let me rotate this so that I can get a better view of it. Okay, so A. Again, you could kind of go in here and draw in your pipes if you want, if that's your thing. Remember that the only time you do the opposite of it, for example, this is a -2, the only time you would turn that into a +2 is when you're trying to send it to the other side. And again, we'll talk about that in just a second. So I went ahead and added 2, that gives me 5, and then go ahead and divide by a 5, that gives you y is greater than 1. So pretty straightforward overall. B is a little bit different. In the sense of solving, yes, very much the same. I'm going to go ahead and do my little pipe. Again, some of you choose to do that, some of you choose not to, and that's your choice. I'm just doing it for those that do enjoy it. So we've struggled with this in the past. This is really saying that I have a +8, right? There's a big difference between having a -8 and an 8, right? One is negative, one is positive. When I'm looking at this, what this is saying is that I have a +8 and minus y. So when I'm trying to get rid of this -8, a lot of people have been trying to do addition of 8. But if I have 8, 8, and I go ahead and add another 8, what's really happening is I have 16. So if I add 8 in this situation, trying to get rid of the 8, it's really just going to give me 16, and that doesn't really take me anywhere. So in this case, think if this is a +8, let's say that you have $8, and you give 8 away, that's going to be a subtraction of 8. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8 on both sides. This negative stays over here with the y because it's kind of attached to the y. The inequality symbol does not change, and then 4 minus 8 gives me -4. Then you need to get rid of this minus sign in front. Some of you would choose to multiply by a negative. I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative. Either would be fine. Doesn't really matter. So by dividing by a -1, do not divide by a -y. The y has to be left behind. So leave the y completely alone. He's minding his own business. Just get rid of the negative sign by dividing by a negative. Negative divided by negative gives me +y. Just remember that when you divide or multiply by a negative number, you do have to remember to switch the inequality symbol. So you'll notice that it's pointing technically this way. Now I'm going to change it so that it's pointing that way. All right, so make sure you do remember anytime you divide or multiply by a negative, you have to flip that sign. -4 divided by -1 should give you +4. Okay, so a lot of times actually on like answer keys or notes or anything like that, I put in a little star that says flip sign to just kind of draw your attention to the fact that I divided by a negative, I should be flipping the sign. Looking at a couple of other ones, I think you should be able to handle that one. D is very similar to C, and also kind of similar to what we just did in B. So again, in this situation, do you have a -4 or a +4? That's the question being asked. Do you have a -4 or a +4? Well, in this case, I have a +4, right? So how would I get rid of a +4? By doing the opposite, which would be -4. So if you ever kind of doubt yourself, just go back and kind of ask yourself, like for example, this one, is this a +8 or a -8? Well, it's definitely not negative because there's no sign there, so it must be positive. Therefore, how would I get rid of it? By using negative. So again, completing this problem over here, the 4 minus 4, these guys cancel out, and you're going to be left with a -y/3. That negative sign can go to the top or the bottom, so I'm going to assume that it kind of goes on the bottom over here with 3. because I have y divided by 3. What's the opposite of divide? Hopefully you say multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by negative 3. R on both sides, multiply by negative 3. Okay, that gives you negative 18 on one side and just y on the other. But again, here's one of those moments that I would say you multiplied by negative, so make sure that you flip the sign. Okay, so if my sign was originally pointing this way, I'm going to make it point that way, and I'm done. Okay, so just be careful with those. Again, most of your setups are the same. F is a little different than D. Make sure that you try to get rid of the 7 first. Then you'll have just a y plus 1 is greater than 14, and then you would subtract 1 as your final step. Please notice that down here you do get the answers. So as you start getting these solutions, so like you have a y is greater than 1, okay, that's down here, check. Okay, I got a y is greater than 4, that's down here, check. Over here I did get negative 18 is greater than y, but you'll notice that I don't see anything like that. The only thing that I see is kind of like this. That probably means that I forgot to rewrite it. Remember that the variable always has to be on the left side. So if I switch the y and the negative 18, just remember that the inequality is pointing this way. I have to change the symbol so that it's now pointing this way. So yeah, you kind of flip it 3 times here. You flip it during the problem, and then when you're rewriting it, you'll flip it again, and now you'll notice that it does in fact match up, and you can cross that out. So I would just recommend as you go kind of double checking your answers down there and crossing them out as you go. Example number 2 are pretty much exactly the same thing. They're just a little more work involved with them, but their answers should look, they're not compound is what I'm kind of getting at here. So A, the only thing that's special is that you have R on both sides, but you'll encounter that in a lot of others, so I want to make sure we have some practice in some others. B, again, we've done ones like that in class. C, I do want to stress, and I think I mentioned this earlier with the pipe, that the only time that you would be doing the opposite of it, like let's say that this is a plus R, I see a lot of people do this, and because they're trying to combine the 9R and the R. But remember, the only time you do the opposite of it is when you're sending it to the other side. And in this case, that's not what I want to do. I want to keep my R's on the same side. So instead, let me just ask you, what is 9R plus R? Well, that's just 10R. They're on the same side. Don't try to change anything. All right, just combine like terms. Then over here, you have this 11R that you want to bring across. Again, ask yourself, is that a positive 11 or a negative 11? Well, hopefully you look at this and say, oh, that's a positive 11. So how would you get rid of it? By using a negative 11. Okay, so negative 11, that should give you negative R plus 2 is less than negative 5. Bring the 2 over through subtraction. Again, I'm running out of space, so I'm going to kind of skip that step. And then last but not least, you have to get rid of that negative sign, so I'm going to go ahead and divide by negative 1. Again, please pay attention that this is dividing by a negative, so you had to flip your sign. You don't actually have to write that on a test or quiz. I'm just kind of drawing your attention to it. And that will leave you with an R. Flip the sign, and then negative 7 divided by negative 1 gives you a positive 7. So again, that is down here. I can kind of check that off. D, a lot of people don't like D just because of that fraction. So I offer some caution or some advice, I suppose you could say. Don't be afraid of the fraction. It's really not that bad. Obviously, start with the left-hand side, distribute that 4. Remember, the 2 just kind of stays out in front, and you're going to get a 4R minus 4. That was the distributing. On the other side, you are still distributing, but a lot of people don't like that 1/3. I do want to point out here that I don't have a calculator on me, but if you have a calculator, you can use a fraction. So there's a fraction button, especially on the yellow calculators, that allows you to type in 1/3. Type in 1/3 and then times it by 9. If you do this, it should tell you 3, and then just don't forget the R. Do it again, type in the fraction 1/3, and then multiply it by 15. That should give you negative 5, and then you're all good with the fraction. So again, don't be afraid of the fractions. Just type them into your calculator. Again, the calculator does a button. There's actually a button that looks exactly like a fraction. Type in that fraction. You can even hit enter if you want, and then multiply it by 15 or 9. So if you encounter a fraction, don't Don't be afraid. Please don't try to do it on your head unless you're an expert with fractions. Otherwise, just use the calculator and you should be fine. At this point, you should combine like terms. So I have a 2 and a minus 4. That should become negative 2 plus 4r. So again, that's staying on the same side, so don't try to do anything fancy. Just try to do 2 minus 4, negative 2. Then, again, kind of drawing in the pipe if you like that. You do need to bring the r's on the same side, so ask yourself, is that a positive 3? It is in fact a positive 3, so to get rid of it, I'd do a minus 3. That leaves me with just 1r, and then negative 5. Then over here, you ask yourself, is this a positive 2 or a negative 2? This is a negative 2, so what's the opposite of negative? Positive. So I need to do a positive 2 on both sides. That makes these bad boys cancel out, and you're left with r. Keep the sign the same, and then over here, negative 3. Once you get your answer, you can see that it is right over here, and you can cross it out. So again, don't be afraid of the fractions. You can just do those on the calculator. Moving on to the back side of your paper. Up top here, you do have compound inequalities. So the first one, a reminder, this is an and problem, so it's kind of a sandwich. What I would recommend here is kind of focusing on this middle section here and saying, how would I solve this? If I just had a simple problem like, 2n plus 1 over 3 equals 1, right? How would I solve this? Well, I would start by getting rid of the 3, right? So I'd multiply it by 3. That's exactly what you're going to do over here. You're going to multiply it by 3. You just have to remember that when, like over here, we multiplied the other side by 3. When you do that, you just have to remember that every side gets multiplied by 3. So that becomes 15. Keep the sign. You have 2n plus 1. Over here, you should get 7 times 3 is 21. Then you'd ask yourself, how would I get rid of the plus 1? Make sure that you save the piece that has the variable. Save this piece for last. Okay, they are connected, they are 1. So until they're completely by themselves, you can't do anything with that. So, we would subtract 1. Again, 14, that gives you 2n, and 20. Then you can finally divide by 2 and get your final answer. And again, I'm trying to make these videos quick, so I'm not going to complete that one. Excuse me. Excuse me. B, I want to point out here that this is pretty much exactly like what we did on the front side. You can even I want to draw a pipe. I just drew a line in there because what you're really doing is you have problem number 1, solve that. Problem number 2, solve that. And then OR problems, remember, we just graph them as is, and then that's what your answer is. And problems, you're usually going to have some type of sandwich where you're shading in between, but just kind of keep that in mind. So if you look at this problem, you have a minus 5, you add 5, divide by a 3. Your variable would be on the wrong side, so make sure you flip it to the correct side. It should be on the left side, but other than that. On the test, I do want to stress that there will be some word problems as such, where they ask you to translate and solve. Make sure that you do remember to solve. I think there was 1 or 2 of you that forgot to solve on the quiz, so make sure that you are paying attention to that. As far as translation goes, it's kind of a combination of a unit a little while ago where you have 5 more than 3 times the number. That's what we talked about before. That's just a simple problem. Is at most 23 is where your inequality will be coming in. So again, reviewing that vocab on that square sheet that I told you guys about with all of our vocab, trying to figure out where did we have at most. And that's just something you're going to have to familiarize yourself with. You won't get that sheet on the paper or on the test, so be aware of that. So when you're looking at this, I'd be thinking to myself, 5 more than means addition, 3 times a number, so 3 times a number, is at most 23. So if you have problems with these, this is what I usually do, is I don't have them memorized. I just kind of think to myself, okay, well, if I can have at most, 23 people in an elevator, that is saying my max limit is 23. Now, I can have anything under 23, that's fine, but my maximum is 23. So if I'm okay with having something under, that means less than. And then at most 23 means I could have 23, that's fine, but anything over is a problem. So I can make that equal to, and then 23. Or for example, coming down here, twice the sum of a number is no less than. So that means that, like, let's think buying something. You need no less than $4 to buy a soda. Okay, well, if you have $3, guess what? You're not getting the soda. So you can not have no less than 4. Okay. Now, I do remind you that when we did the no words, those are a little special. We said that you could think about it more like, what is the sign for less than? This is the sign for less than. When you throw in the no more than, it's going to be the complete opposite of this. So flip it the other way. And if this doesn't have an equal sign, this one should. So no's are kind of special. You could do it that way. Think about what less than would be and then go from there, but not always. And then the last one, again, think minimum. So, the minimum numbers of questions you can get wrong is 5. Anything, more than 5 is a problem. Sorry, I say that backwards. The minimum you can get right is 100. No, sorry, I'm saying this backwards. Sorry, this is a really bad example. Let's think minimum number of cookies. So the minimum number of cookies that you want is 1. So if you get 1 cookie, awesome. If you get more than 1 cookie, that's even better, right? So in this situation, again, thinking to yourself, if you have more than 1 cookie, you are going to be very, very happy. But you told your mom you need a minimum of 1 cookie or else you're going to get hangry. So it can be exactly 1 cookie. You won't throw a fit. But if you get more than, it's going to be great. So think greater than or equal to. Okay, so again, maybe trying to think of some stories like the cookies might help. Okay, and then the last part, this is just matching. These ones shouldn't be too bad. Everything's kind of solved for you over on the side. You just have to look over here and transfer. I do apologize. The numbers seem a little weird as far as the graphs go. So you might just want to write, like, maybe over here, what are the variables that go with it or something like that. Find some way or draw lines. Totally up to you. Okay. All right. Good luck. And remember, the test is coming up.